कम भी अवले जिदे पेश पे जावे अख छड़दा ना पले अवला 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 अवला
And real quickly, before we get into the bulk of today's exploration, really just an exploration of China and Turkey, I wanted to show this photo of Shanghai. And here we have the same impressive architecture that is found all throughout and clearly inherited even in Shanghai. This resembling nothing that we are led to believe about the historical narrative of China. And with that said, let us begin our presentation. We have an image from 1935. And let's play Where Are We? Where is this city in 1935? Bustling bridges, beautiful monuments with fasces, and amazing antiquitech. I don't know what I would have guessed with this one. Hard to see the people, and from what we can see, seeming very in line with the fashion of what we know as 1935. And this is China. China in 1935. And the exact city is Shanghai, the Bund, perhaps this is a district, in Shanghai in 1935, and not what anybody would probably imagine. Not a single clue that we're in China here. Not one. No pagoda, not even a Chinese hat. And in today's modern narrative, we're led to believe that China is an up-and-coming country, people leaving the rural areas in droves to start new lives in the city. And yet in 1935, seeming like they were already there, doing just fine, same building style found all throughout this plain, and just as impressive. And here again, a little look at China. And in this particular picture, absolutely seeming like inheritors. And this is not supposed to be a canal. This is a great flood of something. And again, we get a good close-up at the amazing Greco-Roman style architecture. Just absolutely mind-blowing and intricate, and just like we do, we slap some cheap signage over the doorway, and there you go. We satisfy the masses, and an inheritance is achieved. No questions asked. Primitive people, advanced city and architecture. A massive cataclysm, which is known as the mud flood, and this old world is inundated with mud, and signs of the past civilization are wiped out, but much remains. And our recently introduced populace that we are the children of begins building the way that we build today. And they use wood and simple means, and never quite replicating this ancient style that is found all over the world, that is clearly not our people, and our people do not have the ability in this early 1800s period to even come close to constructing any such things. And in North America, in this time period, the log cabin was the preferred means of building. These are the resources that you have. You can cut down trees and you can build right away without any amazing skills that we see in the old world. And so this introduction, along with the mud flood shortly after, is populated by a people that do not seem to really understand their environment. And we see the old antique fireplaces that fall into dysfunction because they may not have been fireplaces. And we see castles, amazing castles, with no means to heat in the winter. No means to heat these castles. Even with, some had what they would call fireplaces, and yet it is not enough to heat these monstrous buildings, and almost become useless to the modern inhabitants. And this is what we see. We see a confused and awkward people living amongst the most amazing standing buildings, and yet what are traces of an older civilization? And yet we have depictions of our people in horse and buggy and unable to replicate such structures. And yet this seems to be the beginning of our history, of our modern history. And we are told all kinds of stories, but yet during this period we have orphanages everywhere around the world. There is just orphanages like we've never seen to this day. Every city has orphanages, and they're shipping orphans from country to country. And this makes sense when you look at things with a new eye. Now, I won't say I know where these children were coming from, and the stories will tell us it was one country to another. But regardless, we see a populating of youth, and we also see a lot of hunger in this period and in the generations that would follow. I've heard stories from both of my grandmothers that they waited in lines for butter. And how does this come to be? Waiting in line for butter? Well, they will tell us it was the Great Depression. But could people really have staked so much on the stock market? The average person would lead a simple life, according to the narrative in that time period. And a stock market crash would not affect the masses, to where the masses have to stand in line for butter and simple products like bread. Again, out of place people. Not a seasoned people, not even seasoned enough or having the ability to live self-sustainably, and certainly not able to replicate or have the means to build the structures we see all over the world. And by the 1950s, it appears as if things are what we would call somewhat normal, and perhaps the best scenario of the new structure that we've been given and the reality that has been imposed on us. And we go on living this false narrative and working and paying for land and housing and banking and interest and everything else. We're bled. And meanwhile, there are people in the world who hold the majority of all of the wealth, and some are just plain obvious